Okay, so imagine this. You're leading a country, a really young one, and you've got this crucial economic lifeline. It's this massive river, right, cutting through the continent. And it's vital. Your farmers, your merchants, they need it to get their stuff to market.
Yeah, it's their highway, basically.
Exactly. Then, bam, a huge global superpower, kind of unpredictable, takes over the river's mouth.
Yeah.
And they just cut off your access. What do you even do?
Panic, probably, or gear up for a fight you might not win.
Right. But now picture this instead. Instead of a fight, that same superpower turns around and, like out of the blue, offers to sell you not just the river mouth, but, get this, over 800,000 square miles of land.
Whoa.
Yeah, nearly doubles your country size.
Yeah.
And the price, even adjusted for inflation today, it's like less than what we'd spend on a single big bridge project or maybe, some fancy military gear.
Sounds completely unbelievable. Like the best real estate deal ever.
Maybe the greatest, yeah. And that's the story we're diving into. The Louisiana Purchase of 1803. But it's way more complicated and fascinating than just, cheap land.
Oh, absolutely. It was such a pivotal moment, wasn't it? Just this perfect storm of circumstances, big political gambles, and this incredible geographic opportunity that literally reshaped North America.
So we're going to really dig into how it all went down, the economics behind it, the huge political and constitutional headaches it caused, and maybe most importantly, the really big, sometimes difficult consequences that came from grabbing all that land.
Right. And we've got some great material to help us sort through it. We've got bits of the actual Louisiana Purchase Treaty, the fine print,
Yeah, that's cool.
plus research summaries for the big picture, and even some interesting takes, like from Reddit discussions, doing the math on today's dollars, which really makes you blink.
Oh, I bet. We've also got analysis on the whole constitutional fight from the National Constitution Center and historical viewpoints from places like the UMBC History Lab Guide.
So our mission here in this deep dive is really to pull out the key insights from all this stuff to help you understand why this was just such a game changer for the U.S.
Okay, let's jump in, setting the scene. What did this huge territory actually look like before 1803? Who claimed it?
Well, way back, long before the U.S. was even a thing, you had Spanish explorers poking around in the 16th century.
Okay.
But the French were the ones who really made the formal claim. There was this explorer, La Salle. In 1682, he sailed down the Mississippi, reached the Gulf, and claimed the whole river basin for France. Named it La Louisiane for King Louis XIV,
All right, Louisiana. Makes sense.
And it stayed French for quite a while, on paper at least, though, not super heavily settled by Europeans compared to the British colonies over on the East Coast.
But things are always shifting back then, weren't they? Geopolitics, colonial powers, fighting.
Constantly, especially between France and Britain. That rivalry heated up big time in the mid-18th century.
Leading to the 7 Years' War, what we call the French and Indian War over here.
Exactly. And by the end of that war, around 1763, France had lost. Big time.
They lost a lot of territory in North America, right? East of the Mississippi went to Britain.
Pretty much all of it, yeah, in the main Treaty of Paris. But just before that, in a different kind of secret deal, the Treaty of Fontainebleau, France, handed over the Louisiana Territory west of the Mississippi, including New Orleans, to Spain.
Wait, why Spain?
Well, a couple of reasons. One, keep it out of British hands. Two, Spain was their ally, and Spain had lost Florida to Britain in the same war, so this was sort of compensation.
Okay, so after 1763, Spain's technically in charge of this massive chunk of land.
Technically, yes. Though, French culture, language, it all remained pretty strong there. But Spain held the title.
Now, fast forward a bit. While Spain's holding Louisiana, you've got American settlers starting to push west, over the Appalachians into places like the Ohio and Tennessee River valleys.
Right. And for them, that Spanish territory, especially the Mississippi River and that port, New Orleans, it wasn't just some faraway place on a map. It was like their absolute economic lifeline.
Lifeline, yeah. Because getting goods back east over the mountains was brutal back then.
Brutal. Incredibly hard, slow, expensive. Roads were terrible, if they existed at all. But the rivers, they were natural highways. And the Mississippi system, its tributaries reached deep into the American frontier. It was the way to move goods.
So everything they grew or made, tobacco, flour, pork, you name it, had to float down the river.
Had to. They'd load it onto flatboats, barges, float down to New Orleans, and there, the crucial step, transshipping, moving it onto bigger ocean-going ships.
Get it to the East Coast markets or even Europe.
Exactly. Without reliable access to New Orleans, those Western settlements were basically economically choked. It really was, as the sources say, their commercial lifeline.
Okay, so you had this kind of uneasy setup for a while. Spain controls the port. Americans need to use it. Generally, Spain lets them. But then something changes behind the scenes, something that freaks out the U.S. government.
That's right. It leads us to another secret deal. The Treaty of San Ildefonso, October 1800. Napoleon Bonaparte, who's really calling the shots in France now, pressures Spain, and Spain agrees to give Louisiana back to France.
Napoleon wanted it back. Why?
He had these grand ambitions. He envisioned restoring a French empire in North America. Louisiana was supposed to be the breadbasket, the supply base for France's really valuable sugar colonies in the Caribbean, especially Santo Domingo, which is modern Haiti.
Oh, okay. That makes strategic sense. But the U.S. finds out about this secret transfer.
Eventually, yeah, the news leaks. And President Jefferson, his whole administration, they are deeply alarmed.
Why was France, under Napoleon, seen as so much worse than Spain controlling New Orleans?
Well, think about it. Spain, by this point, was kind of a declining power. Yeah, sometimes difficult, but they didn't really have the muscle or, frankly, the aggressive drive to seriously threaten U.S. access long term. They were sort of the known quantity.
Whereas Napoleon?
Napoleon's France was dynamic, expansionist, militaristic, and, frankly, unpredictable. A powerful French army controlling New Orleans, blocking the Mississippi. That was a nightmare for American trade for westward expansion. It felt like a much, much graver threat, as the sources put it.
And things went from bad to worse almost immediately, didn't they? A crisis flared up.
It really did. So France owns Louisiana again, but the Spanish administrator, a guy named Juan Ventura Morales, is still physically there, running things until the French officially take over. And in October 1802, Morales does something drastic.
What did he do?
He issues an order withdrawing the American right of deposit in New Orleans.
Whoa. The right of deposit. That sounds important. What was it exactly?
Super important. The U.S. had won this right from Spain back in 1795 with the Pinckney Treaty. It basically meant American merchants could unload their goods coming down the Mississippi, store them in warehouses in New Orleans, duty-free, while waiting to load them onto ocean ships.
So taking that away.
It essentially corked the bottle. It stopped American trade flowing down the river dead in its tracks, a direct hit to the economy of the American West.
Okay, I can see why people would be upset.
Upset is putting it mildly. The sources say Westerners were greatly aroused. Their entire livelihood was suddenly threatened.
And it wasn't just complaining, right? There was talk of real action.
Oh, yeah. The anger was so intense, there was a very real possibility that armed Westerners might just march on New Orleans and seize it themselves.
Wow. That could have meant war with France.
Exactly. A war the young U.S. really, really wanted to avoid. So Jefferson is under immense pressure. He needs to fix this peacefully if possible, but he needs to fix it.
So, with this crisis boiling over, Jefferson has to make a move. But his initial plan wasn't about buying half a continent, was it? It was much smaller scale.
Much smaller. Our sources show he focused on the immediate problem, getting that river access back. So, early 1803, he sends James Monroe over to France.
Tell about Robert Livingston, the American minister already there.
Right, and their instructions were pretty clear, reflecting Jefferson's main worry and his budget constraints.
What were they told to do?
Basically, try to buy the city of New Orleans itself, or at the very least, guarantee permanent U.S. access and that right of deposit. They could also try to buy the Floridas, but only if France actually owned them, which wasn't even clear.
And budget.
Strict limit. They were authorized to offer up to $10 million max. For the city, maybe Florida, and river rights. That was it. That was their mandate.
So $10 million for city, basically. They head off to France with that mission. But while they're traveling, things are changing fast on Napoleon's side, right?
Yeah.
Leading to this completely unexpected offer.
Totally unexpected. And the key driver here is what was happening in the Caribbean, specifically Santo Domingo, Haiti. Napoleon had poured resources into crushing the slave rebellion led by Toussaint Louverture. He sent a huge army.
And how is that going for him?
Disastrously. An absolute catastrophe. The sources really stress the massive losses the French suffered. They were fighting fierce rebels, sure, but they were also getting wiped out by disease, especially yellow fever.
Wow.
Tens of thousands of veteran French soldiers died there. It was incredibly expensive, bloody, and ultimately, it was failing.
So his whole vision for this North American empire with Louisiana feeding the Caribbean colony.
Collapsing, because the cornerstone controlling Santo Domingo was crumbling. As the sources say, this failure made Louisiana of little value to Napoleon anymore. Its main strategic purpose, being the granary for the islands, was gone. If he couldn't hold the islands, what's the point of holding this vast, expensive territory on the mainland?
Okay, so the disaster in the Caribbean makes him rethink Louisiana.
Fundamentally. And add to that, Napoleon's gearing up for another war in Europe, especially against Great Britain. He needed money. Badly. After pouring funds into Santo Domingo, his treasury was strained.
And holding Louisiana wasn't cheap, I imagine. Plus, the British threat.
Exactly. He needed troops for Europe, not guarding swamps and plains in America. And there was the very real fear, mentioned in the sources, that as soon as war with Britain restarted, the British Royal Navy would just sail over and take Louisiana from France anyway.
So selling it to the Americans gets him cash, keeps it from the British.
Gets him cash, denies it to his main enemy, saves him the cost of defending it. Win-win-win for him, in a way.
And there was that other angle, too, wasn't there? About the U.S. relationship with Britain.
Yeah, a bit of geopolitical maneuvering. Napoleon really disliked the British. Selling Louisiana to the U.S. could strengthen America, potentially build it up as a future maritime rival to Britain, as one source puts it, create a long-term headache for London. Plus, the crisis over New Orleans was pushing the U.S. closer to maybe allying with Britain. Selling the territory could prevent that. And, avoid a potential war with the U.S. if those angry Westerners actually did march on New Orleans.
So it's this perfect storm hitting Napoleon.
Yeah.
Caribbean failure, need for cash, fear of Britain, messing with Britain via the U.S.
All converging. And it leads to this stunning moment, April 11th, 1803. Livingston and Monroe are in Paris, ready to talk about maybe buying New Orleans for $10 million. And Napoleon suddenly tells his finance minister, Barbé Marbois, forget just the city, offer them the whole thing, sell all of Louisiana.
Wow, just like that. The American negotiators must have been floored.
Completely blindsided. They had zero instructions to buy an entire territory this size or to spend the kind of money this would take.
But they saw the opportunity.
They absolutely did. They knew they were going way beyond their orders, but they decided right then and there to negotiate. They figured this was just too big an opportunity for the country to pass up.
Okay, so they decide to go for it. How did they actually hammer out the deal? The price, the terms?
Well, there was apparently some haggling over price, back and forth. But once Napoleon made the call to sell everything, the main negotiation moved pretty fast. Marbois, Livingston, Monroe, they worked out the details.
And they ended up with a treaty and some related agreements, right? Dated April 30, 1803.
That's the official date on the documents, yeah. April 30th or the 10th day of Floreal, year 11, if you're using the French Republican calendar they had back then.
Right. And the final price tag for this enormous piece of real estate?
Around $15 million total. But it wasn't just a straight cash payment, it was structured. About $11.25 million went directly to France.
Okay.
And the other $3.75 million, roughly, was the U.S. government agreeing to pay off debts that the French government owed to American citizens.
So the U.S. basically covered France's tab with some of its own people as part of the deal.
Exactly. About a quarter of the purchase price was settling those old claims.
$15 million in 1803. Now, let's talk size again, because that's key to understanding the value here.
Oh, the size is just mind-boggling. We're talking approximately 828,000 square miles. Or, put another way, about 530 million acres.
530 million.
Yeah. It almost doubled the size of the nation, just like that. This huge, mostly unexplored territory stretching from the Mississippi all the way west to the Rocky Mountains and from the Gulf Coast way up into modern-day Canada.
Okay, now bring in those modern comparisons. $15 million back then. What's that today?
Well, the inflation calculators, like the ones discussed on Reddit, put $15 million in 1803 somewhere in the ballpark of, say, $340 million to $415 million today.
Okay, so under $500 million today, which honestly, for half a continent, already sounds ridiculously cheap.
It really does. And then you get those comparisons, like that whole amount is maybe similar to or even less than what it cost to build that temporary pier off Gaza recently, around $320 million.
A temporary pier versus 800,000 square miles forever?
That's start. Or think about Alaska, bought later for $7.2 million, which works out to a higher price per acre adjusted than Louisiana. Compared to, say, the value of just Central Park in New York City today, the Louisiana Purchase price, even inflation adjusted, just seems tiny compared to modern land values or major project costs.
But as that discussion also rightly points out, inflation adjustment only tells part of the story. It tells you the cost equivalent, not the value equivalent today.
Absolutely a critical distinction. That $415 million is the adjusted cost. The actual market value of that land now, forget about it. It's astronomical.
Like trillions.
Easily trillions. If you just take an average price for rural land today in, say, Louisiana, maybe around $3,200 an acre, multiply that by 530 million acres, you're way, way over $1.7 trillion. It just highlights what an unbelievable economic bargain it was looking forward.
An absolute steal driven by Napoleon needing cash and fearing the British.
Yeah.
And as mentioned, land was just fundamentally cheaper back then, right?
Yeah.
Supply and demand.
So much land, relatively few European settlers wanting it yet. It drove the price down incredibly low. About $1.55 per acre, roughly, is what the purchase worked out to. Almost unthinkable today.
Okay, let's peek inside the actual treaty for a second. What were some of the key legal points agreed on in those articles?
Sure. Article 1 is the big one, the main handover. France officially cedes to the United States forever and in full sovereignty the said territory. Clear transfer of ownership, defined by how Spain and France had held it.
And Article 2 specified what was included, besides just the land.
Right. It wasn't just dirt. It included islands nearby, public lots, empty lands, all public buildings, though not private property. That was protected. And importantly, all the government records, archives, documents relating to the territory. A full handover.
Okay. What about the people already living there?
That's Article 3, and it's really significant and complicated. It promised the inhabitants would be incorporated in the Union as soon as possible and enjoy all the rights of U.S. citizens. And in the meantime, their liberty, property, and religion would be protected.
Sounds pretty good on paper.
On paper, yes. But here's a crucial clarification from the sources. In practice, this promise of citizenship and rights did not extend to indigenous peoples or enslaved people living there. That's a really important and troubling asterisk. It set up huge future conflicts.
Wow, okay. What else? Practical stuff.
Articles Phi and V handled the logistics of the handover. How Spain would formally give it back to France, then France to the U.S., transferring military posts to New Orleans, first getting French troops out within 3 months.
And relations with the Native American tribes.
Article 6 addressed that. The U.S. promised to honor existing treaties Spain might have had with tribes until new agreements could be made by mutual consent. Again, sounds reasonable.
But the reality turned out different.
Tragically different, as we'll discuss later. That mutual consent part often got ignored in the rush for land.
Okay, any trade stuff?
Yep, Articles 7 and 8. They gave French and Spanish ships special treatment in New Orleans and other ports in the territory for 12 years. If they came directly from France or Spain or their colonies, they'd pay the same low duties as American ships. After 12 years, French ships would still get most favored nations status. It was a concession to keep some trade flowing.
And the payment details.
Article 9 basically approved the separate agreements covering the payment structure, including that part about the U.S. paying off French debts to American citizens. And Article X just set the deadline for ratification within 6 months.
So a pretty detailed treaty covering all the bases. Seems straightforward. But for President Jefferson actually making this deal work back home, that caused a major headache, right? A big constitutional gamble.
Huge. Because this whole thing ran smack into Jefferson's core political belief, strict construction of the Constitution.
Meaning the federal government only has the powers explicitly written down in the Constitution, nothing more.
Exactly. If it's not listed, the federal government can't do it. All other powers belong to the states or the people. That was his view.
And the problem was?
The Constitution didn't say anywhere the president can buy foreign land. Or Congress, for that matter. As the National Constitution Center points out, the power to acquire foreign territory just wasn't expressly granted.
So Jefferson's in a bind. He sees this incredible opportunity, secure the river, double the country, get France off the border. But his own principles say the government doesn't actually have the power to do it.
It threw him into a real dilemma. He, the champion of limited government, was facing a chance to massively expand the country using a power that wasn't clearly in the rulebook.
What was his first instinct? How did he try to square that circle?
His first thought was, we need a constitutional amendment. He genuinely believed that to legally acquire foreign territory and bring its people into the Union, they needed to change the Constitution itself.
He actually wrote about this, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. He basically said, look, the federal government only has the powers the Constitution gives it. It hasn't given the power to hold foreign territory, let alone incorporate it. An amendment seems necessary. He felt he was overstepping.
But amendments take time. A lot of time.
And that was the problem. The treaty had that strict deadline for ratification, October 31st, 1803. 6 months. No way could they get an amendment proposed and ratified by enough states that quickly.
So the clock forced his hand. Principle versus practicality.
He had to choose, stick to his strict interpretation and risk losing this massive opportunity, or bend his principles for what he saw as an immense national good.
And he chose the practical route.
He did. He decided the potential benefit was just too great to pass up. He went ahead without an amendment, basically trusting that the nation would understand and approve after the fact. He used that analogy of being like a guardian, investing his ward's money wisely, even without explicit permission, doing it for your good.
Kind of like, I know this might be technically wrong, but trust me, it's worth it.
Pretty much. He decided to rely on the nation to sanction an act done for its great good without its previous authority. It was a calculated risk, acknowledging he was stretching his powers.
Was everyone in his administration on board with the amendment idea initially? Or did they have other justifications?
There are different views. James Madison, his Secretary of State, apparently didn't think an amendment was needed. Maybe he saw the power implied elsewhere. And Treasury Secretary Albert Gallatin, who handled the money side, argued that the power to make treaties, which is in the Constitution, inherently implied the power to acquire territory through those treaties.
The implied powers argument. That's different from Jefferson's strict view.
Very different. But it offered a potential legal pathway, even if Jefferson himself wasn't entirely comfortable with it.
And the politics of this were wild, right? The parties kind of swapped their usual positions.
Total irony. The Federalists, usually the party favoring strong federal power, broader interpretations, they mostly opposed the purchase.
Why? On constitutional grounds.
Partly, yes. They argued the government lacked the power. But they also worried it would dilute the power of the original northeastern states, shift the country's balance westward, and hurt their own political standing.
Meanwhile, Jefferson's Republicans, normally all about states' rights, limited federal power, strict construction.
They suddenly found themselves arguing for a broader interpretation to justify this huge federal action. They saw the benefits for farmers, for expansion, for national security. Yeah. Practical politics seemed to trump ideology for a moment there.
So despite the constitutional questions and the political wrangling, the deal moved forward.
The momentum was strong. The benefits, especially for the West, were obvious. It went to the Senate for ratification.
Was the Senate debate long and fierce, given the constitutional issues?
Surprisingly short, actually. Only debated for 2 days. In the end, the sheer scale of the opportunity, the necessity of securing New Orleans, it just seemed to outweigh the constitutional doubts for most senators.
And the vote.
On October 20th, 1803, just beating the deadline, the Senate ratified the treaty 24-7, easily got the 2/3 needed.
And legally, was the purchase ever challenged in court later on? Successfully, I mean?
Nope, never successfully challenged. And interestingly, years later, Chief Justice John Marshall, who was often Jefferson's political opponent but a big believer in federal power, essentially endorsed the idea that the treaty power does include the power to acquire territory. He laid that out in an 1823 Supreme Court case, American Insurance Company v. Cantor.
So Jefferson took a gamble, maybe bent his own rules, but it stuck. And it set a precedent.
A huge precedent. It solidified the idea that the federal government could, indeed, expand the nation through treaties. It was a fascinating moment where pragmatism reshaped constitutional understanding, really.
Okay, so the deal is done. The constitutional crisis averted, or at least papered over. Let's talk impact. What did this massive land grab actually do for the United States? Short term, long term?
Well, the most immediate and obvious impact was just sheer size, geographic. As the sources all say, it virtually doubled the territorial extent of the U.S., like overnight. Adding those 828,000 square miles to the existing country, it fundamentally redrew the map.
And all that new land meant room for growth, right?
Incredible room for growth. It eventually became all or part of 15 new starts. Think about that. From Louisiana itself, up through Arkansas, Missouri, Iowa, Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, the Dakotas, Minnesota, parts of Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, even bits of Texas and New Mexico. Their existence traces back to this deal.
Wow. 15 states. What about the economic side? Beyond just having more land?
Huge economic benefits. First, getting permanent, unquestioned control of the entire Mississippi River in New Orleans. That was massive. It secured Western trade, removed that foreign threat. That alone was huge.
And the land itself had resources.
Vast natural resources, as the sources note.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe the big gold and silver rushes came later, but right away you had incredible grasslands for farming and ranching, huge forests for timber, fertile river valleys. These resources would absolutely greatly enriched the nation's economy for generations.
Plus just space for people, right? The population was growing.
Exactly. It provided an outlet for that expanding population, people looking for new opportunities, new farms, as the eastern states got more crowded.
And did this purchase influence the idea of expanding even further west, like to the Pacific?
It absolutely did. It made possible the nation's later expansion to the Pacific Ocean. Suddenly, there was this huge land bridge connecting the established states to the far west. The idea of a coast-to-coast nation became physically plausible because of Louisiana. It laid the groundwork for manifest destiny, even if the term came later.
Did it change how the U.S. acquired territory in the future?
Yes. It set a precedent for obtaining foreign territory and peoples by treaty. It showed that expansion could happen through negotiation and purchase, not just war or settling supposedly empty land. It became a tool in the expansionist toolkit.
And how did people feel about it at the time? Did it boost national morale?
Seems like it. Sources mention it increased nationalist feelings in the country. It was a big, successful move on the world stage, a tangible sign of the young nation's growing power and potential, a unifying achievement in some ways.
What about internationally? How did it shift the balance of power in North America?
Big shift. It effectively removed France as a colonial power from North America. They were just gone as a major player on the continent. So U.S. foreign policy focus shifted. Now the main friction points were with Spain and later Mexico to the south and west, and crucially with all the Native American nations within that new territory.
And Napoleon's idea about creating a rival to Britain.
Yeah, that turned out to be pretty accurate in the long run, didn't it? The U.S. did become a major maritime and economic power, often challenging Britain. So maybe Napoleon got that part right.
Okay, so lots of positive impacts for the U.S. land, resources, trade security, expansion potential, national pride, shifting geopolitics. But we have to talk about the downsides, the controversies, the negative consequences. This wasn't a simple win, was it?
Not at all. And it's absolutely crucial we acknowledge this. The sources are clear. Acquiring all this land didn't solve America's problems. In many ways, it made them worse.
Like the issue of slavery.
That's the big one. The purchase intensified debates over slavery massively. Suddenly, you have this enormous new area. Will slavery be allowed there? That question dominated American politics for the next 60 years. Every time a new territory was carved out of the purchase, it reignited the fight over slavery's expansion, driving the North and South further apart, ultimately leading towards the Civil War.
So the land meant expansion, but also expansion of the nation's deepest conflict.
Precisely. Yeah. And the other huge tragic consequence involved the Native American populations already living there.
Right. You mentioned Article 6 in the treaty about respecting existing treaties.
Yeah, that promise about executing treaties until mutual consent for new ones. It didn't hold up. The purchase, realistically, paved the way for the removal of Native Americans from their ancestral lands on a vast scale.
The government just wanted the land for white settlers.
Overwhelmingly, yes. That desire trumped treaty rights, trumped any idea of mutual consent. Policies like the Indian Removal Act of 1830, the Trail of Tears, these forced displacements pushing tribes west, often onto terrible land, causing immense suffering, death, loss of culture. That's a direct, devastating legacy of the Louisiana Purchase and the expansion it enabled.
So an incredible bargain and strategic coup for the U.S. government and many settlers, but a catastrophe for Native Americans and fuel for the fire of the slavery crisis.
It's that stark contrast, a moment of national expansion and opportunity that simultaneously deepens the nation's internal moral conflicts and led to profound injustice. You really can't understand the purchase without seeing both sides.
Okay, let's try and wrap up this deep dive. We've gone from a trade crisis on the Mississippi all the way through secret deals, Napoleon's shifting priorities driven by Haiti and war fears, to this absolutely stunning offer to sell an empire.
Right. And then American negotiators, Livingston and Monroe, kind of going off script, grabbing the chance and striking this deal, a deal that doubled the country for what seems like pennies on the dollar today.
We looked at the price, the sheer size, the treaty details, and then that huge constitutional fight it sparked for Jefferson pitting his belief in limited government against this massive pragmatic opportunity.
A gamble he took, relying on implied powers or maybe just national approval, which ultimately worked out politically and set a precedent, but really tested his own philosophy.
And finally, the legacy. Enormous geographic expansion, economic boosts, paving the way to the Pacific, but also, crucially, pouring gasoline on the fire of the slavery debate and enabling the tragic forced removal of countless Native Americans.
It really was so much more than just a real estate transaction. It was this complex intersection of global politics, economics, chance, ambition, constitutional grappling. It literally reshaped the continent, defined America's westward path, but also embedded deeper conflicts within the nation.
So, thinking about everything we've covered, what's the big takeaway here? What should we be mulling over after this dive?
Well, it definitely makes you think about leadership, doesn't it? When faced with a potentially game-changing opportunity that maybe falls outside the established rules, what do you do?
Yeah, that tension Jefferson faced. How do you weigh this huge practical gain for the nation against sticking strictly to your principles or the letter of the law? His choice had massive consequences, good and bad.
It really raises that fundamental question about ends versus means, doesn't it? Can the perceived great good justify actions that might be constitutionally questionable or push ethical boundaries?
And then there's the other side. Seeing the incredible growth and wealth generated alongside the awful cost-intensifying slavery, dispossessing native peoples. What does that tell us about national ambition versus foundational ideals?
Can something be a huge success in terms of national power and expansion, but simultaneously a failure when it comes to upholding ideals of liberty and justice for everyone affected by that expansion?
It forces you to look beyond just the great deal narrative, doesn't it?
Absolutely. You have to consider the full cost, who paid it, and the long, complicated, often painful consequences that ripple out from these major historical moments. The Louisiana Purchase is a powerful case study in the complexities and contradictions of nation building.
Definitely a lot to think about there. A truly pivotal moment with a deeply mixed legacy. That was our deep dive into the Louisiana Purchase. Thanks for joining us.